anytime, any day. Why not right now? Stop looking up to your boss and start being your own boss. Don't work for paychecks. Work for dreams with no regrets. This is Cracking the Entrepreneur Code. If you have the passion, we'll create the blueprint. Now, your host. You know him from his 7 tips to build the business you always wanted, and now you're about to hear a lot more. Jack H.M. Wong.
Welcome. And this is another episode of Cracking the Entrepreneur Code podcast show. And I'm Jack, as you know. Today, I have a very special guest, and his name is Chris Miles. He is actually a cash flow expert. Wow, this is important for entrepreneurs. And he is an anti-financial advisor and is the leading authority teaching entrepreneurs and professionals how to quickly free up and create cash flow today, spending time doing what they love most. So Chris, I love the tagline, that cash flow is king and you can do what you love. How do we do that? So at this session, basically, I will need to tap your brain and enlighten us how to do that, Chris. So I just want to ask you, how do you start your entrepreneurship journey doing what you love to do and teaching people about cash flow?
Yeah, when I first started, it was kind of an interesting point because I went to college like most people are told to do, to get an education and eventually get a good paying job. But in my journey, I wanted to become a business consultant, right?
Oh, okay.
So I figured if I'm going to become a business consultant, I shouldn't just have book smarts. I should also have real life experience. And so I ended up dropping out of college with 1 class to go. And I thought I'll just take a 1-year break and I'll start a business. Right. And the first business that came my way was being a financial advisor. And I started doing that and actually ended up enjoying it. I actually liked it. And when I realized the potential, because even in college, I never wanted somebody to tell me how much I could earn, which is why I wanted to become like an independent business consultant.
Right.
But as I started to do the journey, I realized, wait a minute, do I really need the education? Maybe I should keep trying to do more.
Okay.
And so I did. And in fact, I remember, I did that for 4 years. Eventually, I stopped being a financial advisor. I was like, all the stuff they teach doesn't work.
Oh boy.
And
okay.
I actually I was able to retire when I was just 28 years old. Funny enough, with only about $3,000 in my checking or savings account, because I created passive streams of income. And so I basically started doing the opposite advice I gave as a financial advisor. And I actually did look at going back to finish college, just because I thought, hey, I was so close, why not? But they told me I had to go back to school for about 1.5 years to do that. So I said, forget that. I was going to get a degree in sociology, so
what?
That wasn't going to help me. I was making more money than I make with a bachelor's degree, right?
Okay, yep.
And so I thought, nope, I won't go back. I won't get my MBA. I'll just keep going down the entrepreneur journey. And that's kind of how things got started.
Okay, so I want to go back to what you've just said, because your story is no different from many entrepreneur stories. It's like, okay, the school have taught us something that's not useful, and real world education is more fantastic and more useful. But you did mention that you left the school and you become a business consultant. So why business consultant?
There was something interesting about, I've always wanted to help improve things. I always like to make things better. I like to build a better mousetrap, so to speak, right?
Okay, yep, sure.
And because of that, that was one thing I kind of gravitated towards. I just felt drawn to it. I saw, I knew people that I respected that were a business consultant. And I thought, that sounds like the kind of thing for me. I want to basically go and help people out, see things and help them be able to accomplish things they wouldn't normally be able to do on their own.
Right.
And then walk away with a big paycheck.
Whoa. That is very interesting, because what I learned is here, we always make a distinction between business consultant and business consultant to be. So let me just define who these groups of people are. Business consultants obviously have experiences in running a businesses, and they're able to advise or give solution to their clients. The second group is the business consultant to be, meaning that, it's cool to actually give the solution to the client and get a big paycheck. That sounds cool, but I don't really have experiences in running any businesses. So I'm not sure how I'm in the position to advise my clients. So do you experience something like this when you first started?
Yeah, I was the second person for sure.
Okay.
And that's why I became a business owner, because I realized, hey, be a consultant to big corporations and everything, but
right.
I need to have some real life experience. There was just something that didn't feel right to me about just consulting based on theory, and that was the change for me. And that's why I went into business in the first place. My whole goal was not to stay in business as a financial guy, right? But when I realized that it's almost like you try something new, you're always trying to up level and get a little bit better and a little bit more niched. And for me, it wasn't so much a niche as it was of, hey, I really enjoy teaching about money, even though I didn't know anything about money at the time. I really enjoyed it, and I found a knack for seeing things that many people didn't see.
Right. So you make a very firm decision, not really be a financial advisor. You are very interested in money, although you may not know what exactly it is. So you started doing what you are doing right now, teaching people about cash flow. So that is a very interesting journey. And to people who actually believe very much on the traditional education, we always like to say that the school do not teach us a couple of things like number one, which is what you are doing right now, is how to actually make money. The school never teaches us how to do that. The second one is that the school never teaches us how to start a business. And number three, the school never teaches us the number one skills of all entrepreneurs, that is the skill to sell the product or services. So I'm a firm believer that the real world education is very useful, especially for us who are entrepreneurs. But for me, people still somehow fall in love with the traditional education. I happened to talk to one of my relatives on Sunday, just a couple of days ago, and he is actually looking for a degree program in one of our Singapore universities. He said, I've saved a lot of money. I'm ready to spend 4 years doing part-time engineering. So he asked me this question: what do you think about this 4-year education? Is it worth it? If this is the question my relative posed to you, Chris, how would you answer that?
I'm not totally opposed to getting an education if it helps you get where you want. Like, I would hope that a surgeon would get all the education he's supposed to have or she's supposed to have, right? You never know. I mean, as an engineer, for example, like, I know if I were to hire an engineer, I want somebody who's well trained, just like I would want somebody who's well trained to talk about my business, or like, when I talk about money, you want somebody who's well trained. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a piece of paper, because the piece of paper may not do anything. It may just give you a few basic theories. And I know, going through college myself, I mean, most of the time I was spending taking classes that had nothing to do with my career. And so I like kind of the concept of apprenticeship as an alternative to education, where, you find somebody who is amazing at their work, and you mentor with them. You find out like what they know. You find somebody who has been trained well in the industry and work under their tutelage, and you kind of cut through all the bull, right? Yeah. You cut through all the fluff. And you get right to, hey, this is what they could do. And by the way, this is how people were trained for hundreds and thousands of years. They were trained under somebody who knew how to do it. I mean, if somebody was a medicine woman, obviously somebody would train under her to learn their craft, right? And to learn all their trade secrets. And then they would pass on the torch to them. So does he need to get education? Does he really think the piece of paper is going to work? I don't know. It just depends. I don't think as an engineer it's as big of a deal, depending on the kind of engineer, right? But I'll tell you, like, I had a friend, he actually went through college, got his bachelor's, and then he ended up finding himself during the recession about 10 years ago. Okay, yeah. He's finding himself, he needed to find work. And so he thought, you know what? I'm going to go back to school and get my MBA. And he did. He spent a couple of years, got his MBA, came out, and he spent the next 2 or 3 years trying to find a job. He even tried to become a work under an accountant, and the accountants wouldn't hire him. And he even offered to work for free, and they still wouldn't hire him. It didn't matter what degrees he had. It didn't matter what. It really, I mean, a lot of it depends on your mindset and how you show up more than anything.
So for you as an entrepreneur has already been financially free, is it a very smooth journey for you to reach where you are now? Or do you have any struggle? Like you mentioned financial crisis earlier on. Does the financial crisis actually affect you during your entrepreneurship journey?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've had a few for sure. The biggest financial one I've ever had was actually about 10, 11 years ago. It was right when the recession was starting. And so 2006, I was able to retire. I had streams of income coming in. The way I did it was actually through basically what people refer to today as affiliate marketing.
Okay, yeah.
But I was doing it more organically. I was just referring to 4 or 5 people for different things because people would ask me. This is after I quit being a financial advisor. I vowed never to become a financial advisor again back in 2006. But people would still ask me financial questions because they saw that I was living what I was preaching, which was becoming financially free. And they were noticing a change, and they're saying, "What's going on?" And so I teach them a few things, like I'd say, hey, here's ways you can do things and refinance your mortgage and do cool stuff. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. And I was doing mortgages for that time. And I remember a friend asked me who was a millionaire. He said, Chris, do you really like doing mortgages? I said, well, no, not really. I mean, I love teaching it. I love helping them get the results, but I hate the paperwork and I hate the one that they call like every day leading up to it. And he said, well, why don't you hire that out? Why don't you find somebody who is willing to do that and split the deal? And see, in scarcity, I never was willing to split commissions, right? But as I got over that and I thought from a more abundance mentality, I was like, yeah, sure. So I found a guy who would split it 50-50 with me. I would just spend a half hour to an hour with the client. And then next thing you know, a month later, I get a check for like $1,000 or so. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good wage per hour.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
Where else can I do that? And so I started creating passive streams of income to where I was making like $4,000 or $5,000 a month, working about 3 or 4 hours a week with different companies. And so in 2007, I came out of retirement. I said, you know what? I'm actually going to teach this stuff because people keep asking me how I did it. So I did. I partnered up with some guys that also retired. We were like all in our late 20s, early 30s, and we formed a business. And right when we formed that business, the recession hit. And at that time, a lot of the people we were talking to and teaching were real estate investors.
Yep, that's
Which
true.
at that time, real estate was not doing well, right?
Yep, that's right.
So when they couldn't pay us, we weren't getting paid. Plus, we had our own real estate, and that wasn't paying us either. And so I found myself going from millionaire to upside down millionaire, where I was in the hole $16,000 a month and about $1 million in debt.
Oh my goodness.
And if you could imagine, I mean, I was teaching people. Our whole message was teaching people to get out of the rat race.
That's right.
And what happens is I'm back in it. So I feel like a hypocrite.
How do you feel during that time? Yeah, when you were in that situation?
I went through a few stages of grief, so to speak.
Okay.
The first stage was this just an obstacle. I always find an answer. I have the golden touch. Everything I touch turns to gold. I was a little prideful thinking that I was, awesome, right? So at first I was like, no, there's got to be an answer. There's always a solution. There's always an answer. I always work harder. I'll work my way out of this. I'll find the solution. And then pretty soon solutions weren't coming, at least not as fast as I was hoping. And then pretty soon it started turning into fear and doubt and panic. And especially because I just bought a $750,000 house. I had a nice Mercedes I was trying to make, $1,100 a month payments on. All this stuff was happening to me all at once. And so I finally went from that fear and doubt to all of a sudden acceptance and just, saying, okay, I got to get out of this one way or the other. And I got to a place where I had to accept it, really accept it and not settle, so to speak. But people would say surrender and say, you know what, I got to do what I got to do. I can always get stuff back. I became non-attached to stuff, which was great because I was so attached to stuff. I was using my house and car and things like that. I was showing off because I lacked the confidence before. Money is only a magnifier of the soul. Money only makes you more of who you already are. And so because in my first 4 years of business, everybody kept saying, you should finish college. You should go back and get a job. You should go back to school. You shouldn't go do a business. That's risky. You won't make it. It's too risky. And so when I had made it, I wanted to shove it in their face and say, see, I did it. So that's why I bought the nice house to wow them. It was a humongous house, almost 5,000 square feet with a beautiful chandelier and everything else.
Yeah.
I had the nice Mercedes. In fact, I remember I took one of my old financial advisor buddies. I took him for a drive around the parking lot just to show off my car. Even though we could have walked to the restaurant across the parking lot, I drove him there just to show off. So I had to become non-attached to the stuff. I had to be willing to let it all go. And it felt like I was letting myself go. I felt exposed. It's like somebody taking off a Band-Aid and the wound's right there, right? And so that was beautiful. It was perfect because I remember I drove the Mercedes into the dealership. I said, here, take it because in a month you'll take it anyways. They auctioned it off. So I started getting bill collectors because they auctioned it and I owed $30,000 on the car after they sold it. I ended up foreclosing on the house back in 2009. I kept it for a while, but the bank would never accept any offers. And so I had to foreclose on it. And so I lost my home with a baby. My fourth child was just born the week before we moved out. Lots of stuff happened. And that hurt my ego a lot, but it was perfect because it got me to really reevaluate and all those things I had to learn to get creative. I had no money and no credit. And that's when I started creating all the cash flow stuff for people that came to me saying, Chris, I'd love to pay for your advice, because I started teaching people like, here, I'll help you free up cash flow, because that's what I was doing. I could be in integrity and say, hey, I can help you get creative to find money, because that's what I was doing. The very things I was experiencing, the things I was learning, is the very things that I taught my clients that now over the last 8 years that I've been tracking it, it's helped them free up on average $34,000 a year, which for my one-on-one clients, that's over $100 million total saved.
That's right. It's a huge sum, actually. Think about it.
Yeah.
You kind of like mentioned something along that path from the fear and doubt to the point, enough is enough. That there's a point of decision. There's like, okay, enough is enough. I've got to do something. I take back the control. I let go what happened in the past. So I believe that it's not very easy. Like on hindsight, it may be easy to talk about it. But at that point, what were the things that you actually did to make that decision?
Yeah, most of the strategies were mindset. The hardest thing that I had to deal with was my own mind, the fears and the doubts. I mean, you really have to clear a place. And there are a few books that really inspired me. So 2009 is when I started to dig out of it. Like, funny enough, right after I foreclosed on the house, about 4 or 5 months later, I could have afforded it again. I think it was perfect. I think it happened exactly the way it was supposed to, because I almost had to release everything to gain everything back. And mindset-wise, well, first, there's 2 books I recommend if you're going through a really challenging time. The first one was a book by Donald Trump called Never Give Up. This is obviously before he became President Trump, right?
Yes, of course.
But this is one of his more humble books, which are not many. But he talks about how he wrote The Art of the Comeback while he was coming back. He hadn't even come back, because back in the early 90s, he actually was $900 million in debt. He went from billionaire to almost upside down billionaire. Kind of like I was upside down millionaire. He was 1,000 times that. And he, in 3.5 years, was able to bounce back to the billionaire status again. Fastest recovery of any billionaire in history. And so that he talks about that. He talks about all the challenges he dealt with, which were way harder than mine. So it made me grateful for my challenges, because I realized, wow, my challenges are easy. These aren't so bad.
Nice reframe. And the mindset thing is pretty important. The reason why successful people are not afraid of losing any money is because they can lose quite a big sum to many people, but the money appetite is so big that they can get it back very easily.
It is. Right. You just have to be careful. You have to be careful not to focus just on the money part, because that can deceive you, right?
Right.
I realized that the biggest key to getting out of anything, and I knew this before, even when I got into it, this is what got me to retire in the first place, is I stopped asking, how do I make more money? But I started asking, how can I create value? How can I serve more people? What can I do to create more value for more people? Because dollars follow value you create, especially value that others want in their life. If you realize that everything you do is about service, everything you do is about getting people what they want, the money's easy. The money's just exchanging you, saying, here, I'll give you this piece of paper or this check. I'll give you this money if you can get me blank.
Yeah.
And to them, the money's worth less than whatever you give them. So you got to figure out, like, how do I create so much value that they want to give me a lot of money? Or create a little bit of value and a lot of people give me a teeny bit of money.
That makes sense. Let me just come back to this, because you gave me this favorite quote. So I see this, I say it makes perfect sense. Is I add values to other people's life, then in return, I should deserve honorable exchange in terms of money or other things. The only concern that I have is that, because if a person has emotion attached to the money, like this is a very, very common thing that happens in the Asian culture. It is like, I acknowledge the fact that I have added values to other people's life. I am perfectly fine with that. The problem with the other part of the story is that, but I'm not sure if they see the value, and I'm afraid of asking for money, and I just feel bad of getting paid. This sounds like very illogical, and yet this fear of asking for money keeps popping up in the community, and to one point that I also like, oh my god, how am I going to handle this? Is that people are so afraid of asking for money, although they actually have added values to other people's life. So how would you reconcile this problem?
Well, it depends on what they fear. Why are they afraid of asking for money? What are they afraid might happen?
That's right. Again, it's the emotion attached to money. Because like me, I learned the fact that money is just a piece of paper. I shouldn't have any emotion attached to that. So when I have added values to other people's life, I have no shame, no problem of asking for money. But it is not as easy as what I say. To many people, it is like, I feel bad, maybe money is evil. I mean, the classic phrase many people have learned when they were young is that money is the root cause of evil. It is bad because to ask people for money, you are the bad guy. The problem I've seen in the Asian culture, I've struggled a lot with these people It's like, do you want to be broke or do you want to be rich? Of course, I want to be rich. So if you want to be rich, then how do you see money? How do you look at this piece of paper?
That's right there. So if you can get really down to the problem, the fear, it's much easier. Because, like, for example, the one you addressed, right? The money is the root of all evil. You know, I love, there's a book called Atlas Shrugged. There's a great speech in there. Google this, look up Francisco Money speech. So he's one of the main characters in the book. He's at a party. He's one of the wealthy people, and he's at a party with other wealthy people. But the wealthy people are kind of bad-mouthing money. They're trying to like disgrace it, you know. Even though they have lots of it, they're trying to disgrace it. They're saying, "Oh yeah, well, money's the root of all evil." And he asked a great question. He said, "Well, if money's the root of all evil, well, what's the root of money?" And he goes through the whole process of talking about the root of money is essentially everything that's good on this world. Because, you know, if you really look at money, it's labor, right? Like it's through the labor and service we provide. Just like when you go work a job. I mean, you only accept a paycheck for a certain amount because you believe that you're worth at least a penny less than whatever you accept. Otherwise, you never accept it. Even based on the circumstance, you might be in a desperate circumstance. You might take anything. But in any normal circumstance, wherever it might be, you're not going to take a pay that's much less. You might say, I'm not going to take $5 or $10 an hour. No way. I'm moving on. I'm worth more than that. And so you won't accept it. Employers, they want to pay you, of course, as little as you're willing to accept.
Yes.
But you want to get paid as much as you want to. And when you find out that happy medium where you both say, okay, that's good, you accept it, right? And you accept it because you believe that what they're paying you is a little bit more than what you would accept. And they're paying you because they think you're worth more than what they're paying you. Or they would never pay you that. They say, they're not worth that much. Next. So if you think about whatever price you agree upon, good. If they're willing to say yes to that price, then great. That means they think whatever service or value you're giving is worth more than whatever they're paying. I had the same feeling. I remember when I did mortgages, I thought I needed to be the cheapest guy. Cut my commissions. I used to cut my commissions back horribly. And it was funny. When I did that, people still said no. Because here's the thing. If you're the cheapest person in business, people automatically assume you're the least valuable. Because it's just like when you buy a cheap product, you know, you buy a product that's, you know, like a cheap blender. You think, oh, well, it's cheap because it's going to break in a year. Or it doesn't work really well. So what do? You buy the better blender or the better coffee machine or something, right?
That's true. Yep. And this is what I told my group also. One time I said, well, how many of you would like to make 5 figures a month? Well, obviously lots of people want it. And I said, well, that's very good for you. However, if you are promoting a product that can give you a 5-figure check each month, but you haven't even invested a 5-figure product in your life, so you don't have the experience to convince your buyers why they should invest a 5-figure product. So you've got to actually have skin in the game, learn how to invest a 5-figure product first before you qualify to sell a 5-figure product.
That's true.
That's true. I believe
that's very true.
Yeah. So now that you enjoy what you're doing, you teach people how to free up cash flow. Other than this, do you actually teach other things?
Yeah, I focus a lot on the cash flow as being the main theme, but I really work like a strategist. I've tried to help people create a game plan to get them out of the rat race.
Right.
So because I've gotten out of the rat race, so I'm like, okay, I'm in integrity to be able to teach it again. And so I try to teach them to do that. You know, whether they're in business and they're saying, you know what, I would love to work in my business because I love it, not because I need the money. Like, for example, I had a client last year where she's in her mid-50s and she's like, you know, I like my business, but in fact, she hired a business coach to ramp up her business, to do more. But she realized, she's like, I don't want to work more. I want to work less. And so we did. We got her money working for her to where she was able to retire. She's now living in Bali and scuba diving and teaching occasional yoga and having fun. So that's one group. Where I have another group, we're trying to get them to quit their jobs, to be able to get to the point where they can quit. And in fact, it was cool because one of my clients just recently, she didn't quit, but she got laid off, which was stressful because we had just begun just a few months prior. But as we started looking at the finances, we were like, you know what? You're okay. You don't even need a job right now. Let's take your time if you want to go find something else to do. Or maybe we do something different, you know, in the investing world or something, right? But we did have other investments paying for that. Even though she lost her job, she was just fine. And now she's got a job back, and now she's got all this extra money that's totally gravy. And so that's the cool thing is if you get your money working for you, your money in your business working for you, you don't have to keep working so hard for money. And so that's my whole focus now.
Yep, that's right. I love that part about you make the money work for you, not you work for the money, because that is the fantasy world as opposed to the rat race world. And what do you suggest to our audiences if they want to get out of the rat race? What would be the most important thing that they should be aware of for them to make that decision?
They got to look for the right time. And the right time usually is like figuring out like how do we make sure that you're financially prepared to make the leap. I made a leap, back early on when I was a financial advisor. I made the leap a little bit too quickly because I was so emotional. I didn't want to be in my job any longer. I was actually in a world of hurt financially for a few months while I was trying to get stuff together. And I had to go find another job to get myself going again. There's a right time and place to do it. And that's why I teach people to get out of the rat race. You got to have the right timing to do it and the right circumstances. When it's right, it's easy to make that leap.
Right. And of course, you need to make sure everything is right place, right time, right people.
Right savings.
Right saving, yeah. And I guess also like they must know what they really want. They must have some ideas of what they are going to do after they leave the rat race. Otherwise, they will just be sitting down and saying, okay, let me think of doing something.
Yeah, it's good to have an actual working business when you leave,
Right, yeah.
That's much easier. I'll tell you, with my last partnership, I left when I wasn't quite prepared. I did have some things in place, but I remember when, my partnership broke up and they're like, okay, you got a 2-year non-compete. You can't keep working. That's when I created Money Ripples. Luckily, I started creating Money Ripples and I had some things in place that I was able to get the business ramped up where I was able to make 6 figures in the first year, despite a non-compete clause. But you got to be clear on who you're serving. You got to be clear on what you do and how you create value that makes you stand out. Because that's what helped me, is that I was able to come out with my guns a-blazing saying, all right, this is what I do. Here's how I'm going to help you. And because it was more clear than a lot of people that were in my same industry, people were asking me to speak in front of their groups. And they were asking me to do things, because of the reputation I had and because of my clarity. So I agree that clarity is huge.
Wow, I so wish that we have more time so that I can ask you even more questions, but unfortunately I need to wrap this up. So really thank you, Chris, for your wisdom, your insight, and interesting journey for my audiences to learn. Is there any way our audiences are able to search for you and look up, check out what you're doing?
Definitely. I mean, if you love podcasts, I have my own podcast show called The Chris Miles Money Show that you can find on iTunes or whatever your favorite podcast app is.
Sure.
Or you can check out my website, www.moneyripples.com. That's MONEYRIPPLES.com.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll ask my audiences to check out because getting out the rat race is important to many people in my group. So yep, I'll highly recommend them to check you out. And once again, thank you, Chris, for being my guest. And I hope that you have a great time.
Thank you. It's been an honor, Jack.
Yes, so this concludes another episode of Cracking the Entrepreneur Code podcast show. So wait for the next guest to be showing up, and I'm going to ask even more interesting questions so that you all can learn from successful entrepreneurs like Chris here, and you can have a brighter future. So thanks again, Jack Wong. I'm signing off now, and goodbye.
To continue cracking the entrepreneur code, subscribe for more episodes and download the Amazon bestseller, Cracking the Entrepreneur Code, 7 Tips to Build the Business You Always Wanted at crackingentrepreneurcode.com. Learn more about author and host Jack H.M. Wong and book your 30-minute discovery session to overcome any professional challenge at jackhmwong.com/apply.